Back in the 1970s, horror movies were getting pretty dark. Not only did you have something like Wes Craven's Last House on the Left, and later The Hills Have Eyes taking over from a very disturbing and savage level of horror, but you'd also have movies like Tobe Hooper's Texas Chainsaw Massacre and Halloween from John Carpenter. And I don't even need to mention how much of an impact the genre had from a little movie called The Exorcist, but that wasn't the only type of scary movie that people were going to the theater to see. In fact, one film that primarily focused on an animal being the antagonizing force was so successful it blew all of those other entries out of the water, going on to become at the time not only the most successful thriller of its day, but believe it or not, the highest grossing movie of its time.
You're gonna need a bigger boat.
Jaws is a 1975 suspense thriller directed by the one and only Steven Spielberg. It stars Roy Scheider, Robert Shaw, and Richard Dreyfuss. The movie centers around a small town that is fixated on the tourism that usually comes for them with the 4th of July. But this 4th of July, it's accompanied by a massive 25-foot great white shark that has been feeding on people in the area. So an out-of-state marine biologist, an expert shark hunter, and a police chief who doesn't really like the water too much have to set out to stop the monster and save the town. Now, this should go without being said, but I love Jaws. This is definitely one of my most favorite movies of all time, and it's one that I brought up over and over again anytime I could over the last few years. Everything about the movie is important for the film industry, and there's a lot of cool trivia surrounding that. Now, upon release, Jaws was already a big success, surpassing The Godfather as the biggest film for the North American box office, but in January of 1976, it went on to become the highest grossing film worldwide. And it would only be beaten by George Lucas with Star Wars in 1977. So this whole movie, this whole thing we got going on right here, it's nothing short of a huge deal. But why? Okay, why was Jaws so popular? Why did it become the massive success it did? And why is it still regarded as being a very scary movie? Well, a lot of that has to do with the general plot of the film. We open up immediately on a couple of folk singing hippie types out on a beach, before going full-on terror mode when one of them decides to get in the water and gets destroyed by the great white shark that's chosen to feed there. This movie shows early on that the unseen terror of the shark is what the whole thing is really all about, and the music that accompanies the opening kill is iconic at showing you that. That music, by the way, was done by the one and only John Williams, who is what many people consider to be the greatest film composer of all time, having done themes for not only this movie, but all the Indiana Jones stuff, the Star Wars films, Jurassic Park and the Lost World, E.T., Superman, Harry Potter, and way more. And all it took for him to immortalize the shark in this film was two little notes played back to back in a scary anticipation of fear. Now, that opening would go on to introduce us to the larger mechanics of the story, with people like Chief Brody and his family becoming the real heart and soul of the movie. You see, Jaws, in a very simplistic way, is really just a film about a guy doing his job to stop a terrifying threat. And it is terrifying, but it's also so much more than that. You really do connect with the realism of these people in some very believable ways. And when everything boils down to the three leads stuck in a boat called the Orca out at sea, you start to see why this movie works so well. You actually care about these people. So when they're attacked by a shark, it's already been scary picking off people that you don't care about, and you don't want to see the people you really like die. Jaws works great. The other main players in the movie are Hooper, the young college-educated biologist, and a man named Quint, a survivor of the SS Indianapolis from World War II that had its crew ripped apart by a group of hungry sharks decades ago, which makes this whole fight against the Great White a little personal to some degree. Now, I don't want to really speak for anyone else, but the most effective scene in this entire movie for me happens to be one of the early attacks. There's a part in the first Jaws where a local boy is killed by the shark, and I don't know what it is, but the way that whole scene is shot and plays out for the audience, it's really what kicks everything into high gear and makes you focused in on how they're gonna get rid of this thing. They gotta get rid of it. It just killed a kid, and it's been killing a dog, it killed like a whole bunch of other people. This is a bad threat. There's also a certain set of scenes involving a small boat and a great shot of the mechanical shark underneath the water that it really showed up in a lot of my dreams as a kid. I'm telling you, man, Jaws got under your skin if you were a kid, especially like me, into a lot of animals and stuff like that back growing up. But it's all the stuff on land that really gets you hooked. You know, it's the story of the characters going back and forth. How are we going to defeat the shark? Why is everybody against me? I need to protect the town. It's before Chief Brody and the others ever set out to kill the animal in the orca. It hooks you in and gets you excited. Even little moments where all you see is the fin are unsettling and scary, and they just kind of burn into my mind. This has led a lot of people to kind of speculate on why it is that Jaws became one of the scariest movies of the 70s when it had competition from The Exorcist, Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and others. But I think the reason Jaws wound up topping all of those as far as money and influence goes is mainly due to its accessibility. This movie's only rated PG. It was way before PG-13 was a thing, believe it or not. And it's also not about a demon. It's not about a crazy killer or anything like that. It's just a story about a big, nasty fish that likes to eat people. And sometimes nature is scarier than any evil we can think of, from a spiritual entity or bad human experience, because it cannot be controlled. You cannot be reasoned with. It's just a hungry mouth with teeth. You know, just a force of untamable power that really, on a primal level as humans, we do not like being in and around us. I mean, there's a lot of psychology between human beings and snakes that you could probably dive into. So, you know, ancient people used to write a lot about chaos language, where something called Leviathan, which was a pseudonym for the sea, would need to be tamed and killed in order for man to have a chance at survival. Chaos is what that you can't control: waves, the weather, stuff like that. The Psalms and the Bible talk about this. Ancient Mesopotamian and Sumerian religions that are no longer followed do as well. And of course, the story of Jonah. It's a good example that, look, the bottom line is the ocean is a terrifying place we cannot control. You know, there's so much of it that's just out of our depth, so to speak. And that's a big reason that I think stuff like Jaws, a big mouth with teeth underwater where you're out of your element, works so well. It's not just the evils of the world coming at you. It's literally everything. It's the laws of physics, a big hungry beast, uncontrollable waves, the threat of drowning, all of that. This is scary stuff. Of course, everyone really wants to talk about the last act of the movie, where Chief Brody, Hooper, and Quint all have to make their final stand against the monster out at sea, alone without any outside help, and just the manic behavior of Quint to really clash with the sophisticated techniques from the science world of Hooper. It's all incredible stuff: shooting barrels into the monster to stop it, lowering yourself in a little shark cage with the plan being to stab the creature in the mouth with a poison dart, and watch out, some of those tanks might just blow up if you screw with them too much. The last act of Jaws is awesome in every way imaginable, and you almost get a sense of the shark kind of taking its wrath out on the humans during their declaration of war on the fish. I don't know how to explain it, but especially as a kid when I watched the movie and they start shooting barrels into him, you almost get a sense of like this shark's personality. Like he just decides, okay, I'll play. Like we'll go to head with each other. Let's do it. And I don't know. I mean, I could be reading too much into it here because I was a kid when I was watching it, but the shark in Jaws, it's a real antagonist, and it is oh man, this movie's great. So much of the film is quotable, so much of it's fun, and the whole thing kind of goes into overdrive once the orca begins to sink. Quint dies, Hooper is gone missing with only a mangled cage being left behind, Chief Brody up on what's left of the boat while it's sinking, trying to shoot one of the tanks in the great white's mouth. The thing turns into something of an action movie. It's all, the shark is like blazing forward and Chief Brody's firing bullets. It's like something you'd see in a Jurassic Park or other creature feature. It is overdrive, man. This is the kind of stuff that makes an impact, and this is the kind of filmmaking that everyone loves, no matter who you are. The ending of Jaws is awesome. Smile, you son of a... Now, the man that really made all of this work is Steven Spielberg, who was only 26, I think, at the time in which he was making this thing, adapting the novel from Peter Benchley, who viewers of my channel will remember also wrote the other really cool shark story called Creature. So Spielberg was very new to filmmaking in the 70s, but that doesn't mean the lack of experience didn't make him good, because he accomplished more relatability, believability, and terror in this thing than what many other directors could have ever dreamed of. I think Jaws is one of his greatest movies ever, and I think when a lot of people think of the modern blockbuster, it's one of the first things that comes into their mind, and there's a reason for that. We'll get into it later, but he would later go on to direct Jurassic Park because he felt like the people they put in charge to do sequels to Jaws just didn't get what it was all about. So he made a kind of unofficial follow-up, disconnected from it, with the first Jurassic film, which I always thought was kind of like a fun little piece of trivia. This movie made the man's career, and it also kicked off the establishment of summer as the time for blockbusters. And remember, all of those dark and depressing 70s style movies like The Godfather and The Exorcist it was competing with, well, Spielberg and Lucas, they kind of just ushered in a new sense of hope in modern movies that went away from the more mean and nihilistic sensibilities of a Texas Chainsaw Massacre or other type of film. Jaws had a happy ending, after all, and a really cool one at that. The good guys win, just like Luke Skywalker blowing up the Death Star. The monsters killed, and a big change happened in the middle of the 70s, which itself was a politically and economically dark time. Anytime you got a recession, it just sucks, man. People aren't very happy with the world, and movies like Jaws from younger directors kind of help usher in a sense of, hey, keep holding on, man. It's dark out there. A giant shark might be killing everything, and the tourism in the town you live in is sinking. Everybody's panicking, but you can blow it up. You can win. Now look, guys, I know not all of you agree with me, but after this, I kind of check out from Jaws 2 onwards. I've never been a fan of the sequels. I just don't really have much love for those movies, but the original, that's what I consider to be one of the greatest movies ever made, and I'd highly suggest rewatching it anytime you can. That's not the only sort of scary movie that I think deserves attention and praise from this era, though, but it's definitely one of the most important. If you'd like to see me tackle some of the other Jaws movies, let me know, but I really want to get to some other big stars in the genre. Movies that are beyond recognizable for Halloween and beyond is, look, it's what I want to talk about, but hey, those are all just my own thoughts on 1975's Jaws. One of my favorite movies ever. It's an iconic classic that I think should be talked about to this very day. It's so funny because Universal owns this property and like they don't want to do anything with it. Look, I don't like the sequels and I don't want a remake, but come on, we could get like something, a first-person video game or a TV show. Richard Dreyfuss is still alive. I don't know, but what do you guys think? What are your thoughts on the original Jaws and how do you think it holds up nearly 50 years later? I love it, but whatever your own thoughts and opinions happen to be, I'd love to hear all about them in the comments down below.
This shark, swallow you whole.